So I just wanted to go over the time of day project, this color project, one more time. And just a reminder, the whole idea is to think about how photographing at different times of day gives you different, not only color, direction, but also qualities of light. Okay, so you'll find that uh, in the morning after sunrise, you usually have a warm light both at sunrise and at sunset. Uh, for this project, I don't really, it's okay if you don't have pure sunlight, if it's overcast or whatnot. The quality and direction of light still changes, or the color and direction of light, the quality might not, because if it's all cloudy, it's all cloudy, right? Um, so the whole idea is to go out and find an interesting scene where you'll have light hitting something that you can look at, right? So you could be looking at just about anything, but it shouldn't be a field, or it shouldn't be just something that's flat, if that makes sense. It should all, the idea is that to see how light and shadows are cast on a scene with some three-dimensional objects. Okay, so the idea is to go out and photograph at these 4 different times a day, and extra credit if you can also do a night photo. So for the 4 different times of day, if you aren't comfortable on manual exposure yet, you could do aperture priority, shutter priority, or auto. But I'd encourage you to try doing manual exposure and try centering out that meter to make sure that you're getting enough light. Look at the preview on the back of your camera, obviously. And the thing about that preview on the camera is those screens don't always show you the same as what you're capturing. So I would, play it back, look at it. But if you have a histogram in your camera, that's the best way to really know that you have a good exposure on manual exposure. And remembering that you want to fill out that histogram as much as possible without having all of your values all the way to the right hitting the wall, or all the way to the left. Ideally, you want to have them in the center. And if there's a little space on either the right side or left side, that's great. If the information's only on the left half, that's definitely underexposing. And if you want to really get a good exposure, you want to have the information fill out almost all the way to the right wall, or touching the right wall, but without it spiking up. Okay, so times a day: sunrise, so before class time, 6:45 to 7:45 in the morning. If you just absolutely can't be up that early, just make sure it's by 8:30, somewhere in that range. But within an hour, 2 is okay, but within the first hour is usually best. That's what we call golden hour, the hour right after sunrise and the hour right before sunset. All right, then we have solar noon. Solar noon is going to be around noon, 12 o'clock p.m., but it's really typically solar noon, depending on the time of year, is more like 12:30. So between 11:30 and 1:30 is my recommendation. And then about an hour before sunset, so between 4:30 and 5:30. The sunset's around 5:30 these days. And then a little bit after sunset. So I should really say, instead of 5:30, I should be saying 5:40 to 5:50, but it's in that range where you have light coming over the horizon, but it's not direct light, if that makes sense. And so what we end up with is really warm in the morning, right after sunrise, really warm right before sunset. It's colder, and you have heavier shadows usually at noon. Okay, right. So like if you have a portrait outside, you have heavy shadows in their eyes, from their eyebrows, basically. And so it's hard to, there's a lot more contrast. It's harder to get detail in the shadows. And then right after sunset, we end up with a very cool, soft light. And so it's light that's coming over the horizon. It's bouncing off the clouds and such, but it's not direct light. So it's a really soft, cool light. And you get this very, very drastic change from this hard, if it's a sunny day, hard sunset light that's warm, to this really soft blue light, cool light, right at dusk, basically. If you're doing a night photo, which is the optional extra credit one here, You want to do it, once the light coming over the horizon has ended. So usually that's about half hour, 45 minutes after sunset. And for that, you're going to need to be on a tripod. You're going to need to be on manual exposure, and you're probably going to set your I keep your ISO low relatively so it doesn't get too noisy, but not doesn't need to be 100. It could be 400 or even 800. You're probably going to open up your aperture a bit more to let more light in, and then make your shutter speed longer. So it might be like a half a second long exposure, but you'll have to play with these settings and just let in more light and let in more light until you can see enough. In fact, I might do a picture, with, we were talking about stops last week. So if you open it up and you can see a little bit of the image, but it's dark, just take a picture, go 3 clicks more light, take a picture, 3 clicks more light, take a picture until it feels like it's too bright. And then you might end up with 3 or 5 or even 7 different photos or so with different brightnesses, but you can bring them all into the computer and pick which one is the best after the fact. All right, so compositionally, we want to try and make the same composition. I would probably go pretty wide with your zoom. And you could probably either tape it or mark it in some way so that you know what zoom you have, as well as if you're using a tripod, you could take some chalk or something like that and chalk on the sidewalk or wherever you are in order to know where to put the tripod, right? Because you don't want to leave your tripod outside for a whole day basically doing this, but you want to get back to about where you were. So I'm just saying, mark it and hopefully you can see it and go back to it. And one last note, and I think I said this in person, avoid pointing the camera directly east or west, because if you don't plan it out ahead, you may end up with just the light shining straight into the camera and it, lots of lens flare, and it's almost impossible to see. So I normally recommend students point the camera north toward north, because when you're pointing north, the sun's never going to be in the frame or directly pointing into the camera. You don't need to do this, but it's just a good way of making sure that you're not going to have the sun blinding the camera. So here's some examples, and I have 2 sets that are larger, and then there's just kind of grids of 4. So here is what I believe these are in order. So let's call this sunrise, high noon, sunset, and then dusk. Right, and I can see the street light has come on over here, but there's still lots of light on the horizon. Again, sunrise, midday, sunset, and dusk. And then I'm assuming these are in order: sunrise, midday, sunset, dusk. Yeah, that sounds right. So here's an example of this little point here. This is, the sun's not in our frame, but because we're pointing towards the sun, we're getting a little lens flare. You could just, if you see that when you're capturing it, you could just hold a notebook or your hand, hold it up so it's out of the frame, but at the front of the camera to cast a shadow on the lens, and then you wouldn't end up with that. I think this one's a pretty dramatic change in the color of light that you can see them. But I wish there was more shadows that we could see. I mean, there's a little bit of sunlight peeking through here, and there's definitely sunlight there. But the direction of the light is harder to see. And then this one's clearly at night. So if you get a good night photo, you could sub that in for any of them, or include it, and we'll have all 4 of them. So I hope that helps you understand the project a bit more. It'd be great if you can start photographing this before Tuesday, because I know there isn't much time between Tuesday and Thursday, right? So, it's just snowed. It's going to be hard to get photos without, the photos are I don't know what I'm trying to say. Snow is not the best thing for this sort of project, but just try and get as much sunlight as possible. And this, as I think I said in class, this can be photographed on one day. This can be photographed in a variety of different days. But the idea is to try and recreate that composition as close as possible so we can really see the difference in the light.